At minus 50 degrees Celsius, metal can shatter like glass. Your breath freezes before it leaves your mouth. Exposed skin burns in seconds. And if you stop moving for too long, your body shuts down. The ice beneath your feet can crack without warning, fall through, and there's no coming back. Yet people live here. Children walk to school in this cold. Families hunt, fish, and sleep through months of darkness. Life doesn't pause, it adapts. This is Greenland. The largest island on Earth. With fewer people than a small city. For centuries, the world ignored it. Too frozen. Too remote. Too unforgiving to matter. But the ice is melting. And beneath it lie minerals worth trillions of dollars. Above it, new Arctic routes are opening. And suddenly, the most powerful nations on Earth are paying attention. One US president even tried to buy it. So, the real question isn't how do people survive in a place this cold? It's this: why is the world fighting over it now? To understand that, you first have to understand the contradiction. Greenland is not a frozen wasteland where humans merely endure. It is a homeland. Children wait for school buses in darkness that lasts months. Parents teach survival not as a sport, but as a routine. Hunters read ice the way others read traffic lights. The cold is not the enemy here. Ignorance is. Because while the world sees ice, Greenlanders see roads, seasons, memories, and meaning. And for most of modern history, that meaning was invisible to everyone else. But today, Greenland is no longer invisible. As the planet warms, the Arctic is opening. Ice that once sealed the north is retreating. Routes that were once impossible are becoming viable. and a land that was once locked away is being exposed. What lies beneath Greenland's ice is not just frozen rock. It is leverage. Minerals critical to smartphones, electric vehicles, wind turbines, and modern weapons. Geography that sits between North America and Europe like a gatekeeper. And a future shaped by climate change, whether the world is ready or not. Greenland was never empty. It was simply ignored. And now, as the ice thins and the stakes rise, the world has begun to look north. Not to visit, not to admire, but to compete. Greenland is not cold in the way most people imagine cold. This is not the kind of cold you escape with thicker jackets or warmer coffee. This is structural cold, cold that reshapes how life works. At temperatures below -40 degrees Celsius, exposed skin freezes in minutes. Plastic becomes brittle, metal contracts and fractures. Diesel engines fail unless specially treated. Batteries drain rapidly. The human body burns calories simply to stay alive. And yet, across this vast island, people wake up, prepare food, send children to school, and step outside, not as an act of bravery, but as routine. That is the first misunderstanding outsiders have about Greenland. Life here is not lived on the edge of catastrophe. It is lived through adaptation. Most of Greenland's population lives along the coast. This is not accidental. The interior of the island is dominated by the Greenland ice sheet, a massive body of ice averaging more than a kilometer thick in places. It covers roughly 80% of the island's surface and makes inland settlement nearly impossible. Along the coast, however, yet the ocean moderates temperatures slightly and provides the foundation of Greenlandic life: fishing, hunting, and transport. There are no highways connecting cities in Greenland, no railroads, no road network tying the island together, only short roads within towns. Each town and settlement functions like a small island of human presence, connected to others only by boats, planes, or helicopters. In winter, when the sea freezes, snowmobiles and dog sleds replace ships. Travel becomes slower, quieter, and more dangerous. Weather can ground aircraft for days. Supply ships may be delayed for weeks. This isolation is not a side effect of Greenlandic life. It is a defining feature. Every carton of milk, every piece of fruit, every building material must arrive by sea or air. The farther north you go, the more expensive everything becomes. In remote settlements, basic groceries can cost several times what they do in Europe or North America, and yet people stay. They stay because Greenland is not just a place to survive. It is a place to belong. The majority of Greenland's population is Inuit, indigenous peoples whose ancestors adapted to Arctic life over thousands of years. Their survival knowledge was not written in books or taught in classrooms. It was passed down through observation, storytelling, and practice. Knowing when ice is safe to cross, recognizing subtle color changes that signal weakness, understanding animal behavior as weather indicators. These are not cultural artifacts, they are survival systems. Modern Greenland blends this traditional knowledge with contemporary infrastructure. Satellite internet reaches towns that have no roads. Snowmobiles sit beside dog sleds. Smartphones exist alongside centuries-old hunting practices. This blend is fragile. Extreme cold shapes not just movement, but psychology. In parts of Greenland, the sun does not rise for months in winter. Darkness becomes normal. Artificial light replaces daylight. Time loses its usual rhythm. In summer, the opposite happens. The sun refuses to set. Children play at midnight under a bright sky. Sleep becomes difficult. Curtains are thick. Clocks matter less. These extremes affect mental health in ways outsiders often underestimate. Seasonal depression is not a trend here. It is a reality managed through community, routine, and resilience. What shocks most visitors is not the cold itself. It is how normal life appears within it. And children wait calmly for school buses in temperatures that would close cities elsewhere. Families sit together outdoors, faces rimmed with frost, talking quietly. Hunters prepare gear with the same focus a commuter gives their car keys. There is no drama in this, only familiarity. This is why Greenland confounds expectations. It is not a frozen outpost clinging to existence. It is a functioning society shaped by limits, but those limits are changing. The cold that once protected Greenland by keeping it isolated, inaccessible, and strategically irrelevant is slowly loosening its grip. And as it does, the world's interest is growing. Not because Greenland has suddenly become warmer or easier to live in, but because what lies beneath the ice and where Greenland sits on the map are becoming impossible to ignore. Before the world began fighting over Greenland, it had to notice it, and for most of history, it didn't. For most of human history, ice meant absence. Where ice dominated, agriculture failed, trade slowed, empires stopped expanding. Ice was nature's boundary. That is why, for centuries, Greenland remained on the edge of the world's imagination. Maps showed it. Explorers visited it, but global power never revolved around it. There was simply no reason to fight over a place buried under kilometers of frozen water. But the ice that once concealed Greenland is now revealing something far more consequential. Beneath the Greenland ice sheet lies one of the oldest and most complex geological foundations on Earth. Some of the rock formations here are more than 3 billion years old. Formed when the planet itself was still unstable. Over vast stretches of time, volcanic activity, tectonic collisions, and deep magmatic processes concentrated rare elements into unusually rich deposits. In simple terms, Greenland did not just freeze over, it fossilized opportunity. Geologists describe Greenland as a geological archive, a place where ancient processes were preserved instead of erased. Glaciers scraped away surface layers, exposing deep mineral veins closer to the ground than in many other parts of the world. What would normally be buried kilometers underground in warmer regions is, in Greenland, often closer to the surface. This matters because modern technology is built on scarcity. The devices that define contemporary life, smartphones, electric vehicles, wind turbines, satellites, advanced weapons systems, rely on a narrow group of elements known as rare earths. Despite their name, these elements are not truly rare. What is rare is finding them in concentrations high enough to mine economically. Rare earth elements include neodymium and dysprosium, which are critical for permanent magnets. These magnets allow electric motors to be smaller, lighter, and more efficient. Without them, electric vehicles would be heavier, less powerful, and far less practical. Wind turbines would shrink in efficiency. Precision-guided weapons would lose reliability. Satellite systems would degrade. This is not a hypothetical dependency. It is structural. Today, the global supply chain for rare earths is fragile. A single country controls the majority of extraction, and more importantly, the overwhelming share of processing capacity. Processing is the step that turns raw ore into usable material. Without it, mined rare earths are just rock. That concentration creates leverage. If supply is disrupted, entire industries feel it. Prices spike. Production slows. Strategic vulnerabilities emerge. Governments do not like this kind of dependence, especially when it affects energy transitions, defense systems, and critical infrastructure. This is where Greenland enters the picture. Estimates suggest Greenland holds significant reserves of rare earth elements, potentially rivaling or exceeding those of many established producers. What makes these deposits especially attractive is not just their size, but their composition. Several Greenlandic deposits are rich in the specific rare earths most in demand for clean energy technologies. However, these resources are not evenly distributed across the island. The most known deposits are located along the southern and western coasts, where access is marginally easier and infrastructure, though limited, exists. Yet even here, mining is not straightforward. Many rare earth deposits in Greenland occur alongside uranium. Uranium is radioactive, and its presence complicates extraction. Mining rare earths in such conditions requires strict environmental controls, long-term waste management, and political acceptance, all of which raise costs and controversy. This tension came to the surface in the early 2000s when Greenland's government enacted restrictions on uranium mining. The decision was driven by public concern over environmental damage and radioactive pollution, particularly in regions dependent on fishing. Fishing is not just an industry in Greenland, nor it is the backbone of the economy and a core part of cultural identity. To outsiders, this may seem contradictory. Why restrict mining when it promises economic independence? To Greenlanders, the logic is clear. The environment here is not resilient in the way tropical or temperate ecosystems are. Damage takes decades, sometimes centuries, to heal. A single contaminated fjord can disrupt entire communities. Once trust in food safety is lost, markets disappear. This is the first major misunderstanding many observers have. Greenland is not desperate for development at any cost. It is cautious because it has learned the cost of outside decisions. Beyond rare earths, Greenland holds other strategic minerals. Iron ore deposits exist in quantities large enough to attract global attention. Graphite, essential for battery anodes, has been identified in multiple regions. Copper, which underpins all electrical systems, is present in commercially interesting concentrations. There is also gold. Several gold projects have moved from exploration into production in southern Greenland. While these operations are small by global standards, they signal a shift. Greenland is no longer just a theoretical resource frontier. It is becoming a real one. Diamonds, sapphires, and rubies have also been found, embedded in kimberlite pipes and metamorphic formations. These gemstones do not define Greenland's strategic value, but they reinforce the same message. This land is mineral-rich in ways previously underestimated. Then there is oil and gas. According to geological surveys, Greenland's offshore basins may contain substantial hydrocarbon reserves. Estimates vary widely, and not all projections will materialize. But even conservative assessments suggest potential reserves comparable to those of mid-sized oil-producing nations. Extraction, however, is brutally expensive. Arctic drilling requires specialized platforms, ice-resistant infrastructure, and enormous capital investment. Weather windows are short. Environmental risks are high. When oil prices fall, Greenland becomes uneconomical almost overnight. This is why major energy companies have repeatedly entered and exited Greenland over the past half-century. Exploration surges when prices rise and retreat when markets soften. Policy shifts, environmental concerns, and public opposition further complicate long-term planning. For Greenland, oil represents both promise and peril. On paper, oil revenues could fund independence. In reality, a dependence on volatile global markets could create a fragile economy exposed to forces far beyond local control. This brings us to the deeper issue beneath Greenland's ice: leverage. Greenland's value is not just in what can be extracted, it is in what can be denied. In a world where critical minerals shape geopolitical power, control over supply matters as much as possession. Even undeveloped resources influence negotiations, alliances, and strategic planning. Greenland does not need to mine everything to matter. The mere possibility shifts global calculations. As climate change accelerates, access to these resources becomes easier. Ice retreats expose land that was previously unreachable. Permafrost thaws, altering terrain stability. Shipping seasons lengthen, reducing transport costs. Not the same process that threatens coastal cities worldwide is transforming Greenland from a frozen barrier into an accessible asset. This is the paradox at the heart of Greenland's story. The ice that sustained Greenlandic culture by isolating it is now eroding. And as it does, the world's interest intensifies. What lies beneath the ice is not just wealth, it is choice. Choice about development, choice about independence, choice about who gets to decide Greenland's future. But resources alone do not explain why global powers are paying attention. For that, you have to look not downward, but outward, at where Greenland sits and what that position means in a warming world. If Greenland's minerals explain why the world is interested, its geography explains why that interest has turned into competition. On a globe, and Greenland does not look central. It appears remote, pushed to the edge of the map, far from population centers and trade routes. But maps lie. They flatten reality. Viewed from above the North Pole, Greenland sits at the crossroads of the Northern Hemisphere. It lies between North America and Europe, anchored between two continents that together shape much of the global economy and military power. To its west are Canada and the United States. To its east are Iceland, Norway, and the European mainland. To its north is the Arctic Ocean, once frozen solid, now increasingly navigable. To its south are the North Atlantic shipping lanes that connect the world's most developed economies. This position gives Greenland a quiet but decisive advantage. It is unavoidable. Any aircraft flying the shortest route between North America and Europe passes near or over Greenland. Any missile launched across the Arctic must cross airspace monitored from its vicinity. Any future shipping traffic that cuts through the Arctic will pass within reach of its coast. During the Cold War, this reality became obvious. The United States established a military presence in northern Greenland decades ago, building early warning systems designed to detect incoming missiles from the Soviet Union. Radar installations, listening posts, and air bases were placed not because Greenland was powerful, but because it was perfectly positioned. That logic has not disappeared. It has evolved. Today, military strategy is no longer defined only by bombers, and ballistic missiles. It includes satellites, hypersonic weapons, and cyber infrastructure, undersea cables, and space-based surveillance. Many of these systems rely on early detection, line-of-sight coverage, and geographic proximity. Greenland offers all three. As Arctic ice retreats, the region is transforming from a frozen buffer into an active theater. What was once impassable for most of the year is now seasonally open. Shipping routes that cut weeks off traditional journeys through the Suez Canal or around Africa are becoming viable during summer months. The Northern Sea route along Russia's coast and the Northwest Passage through Canada have attracted attention. But Greenland sits adjacent to both. Its ports, airfields, and surrounding waters could serve as refueling hubs, repair points, or monitoring stations. This is not speculative. It is already being planned. Russia, and which has the longest Arctic coastline, has invested heavily in Arctic infrastructure. It operates the world's largest fleet of icebreakers, including nuclear-powered vessels capable of clearing paths through thick ice. Russia has reopened or expanded Arctic military bases, installed radar systems, and conducted exercises designed to assert control over northern waters. China, despite having no Arctic coastline, has declared itself a near-Arctic state. This phrase is not a legal category, it is a strategic signal. China views the Arctic as part of its long-term economic and logistical planning, particularly as it seeks alternative shipping routes less vulnerable to choke points controlled by other powers. The European Union, meanwhile, sees the Arctic through a different lens. For Europe, Greenland represents supply security. Reducing dependence on external sources for critical minerals is a strategic priority, and Greenland's proximity makes it attractive. The EU has moved to strengthen partnerships focused on sustainable resource development and environmental oversight. The United States occupies a unique position. It already has a military foothold in Greenland, long-standing ties through Denmark, and deep concerns about rival powers expanding influence in the Arctic. From Washington's perspective, Greenland is both a shield and a gateway, a place that protects North America while enabling access to emerging Arctic routes. This convergence of interests turns Greenland into something far more sensitive than its population size would suggest. It becomes a chessboard. Each move matters not because of immediate gains, but because of long-term positioning. Infrastructure investments, research partnerships, port upgrades, and diplomatic agreements all serve dual purposes. A civilian airport can also support military logistics. A scientific research station can collect strategic data. A commercial port can accommodate naval vessels. This dual-use nature blurs the line between cooperation and competition. Greenland's status adds another layer of complexity. It is an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. Denmark controls foreign policy and defense, while Greenland manages domestic affairs. This arrangement creates overlapping authority and, at times, tension. For global powers, this means any engagement with Greenland must navigate both local governance and international diplomacy. Projects cannot proceed without Greenlandic consent. Yeah, but they also intersect with NATO obligations and European security concerns. This balancing act is delicate. Greenland's leaders are acutely aware of their position. They know interest from major powers brings opportunity, but also risk. History has shown that strategic locations often become battlegrounds for influence, not beneficiaries of it. That is why Greenland's approach to foreign involvement is cautious. Proposals are evaluated not just for economic return, but for long-term consequences. Who controls infrastructure? Who sets conditions? Who benefits when priorities shift? The stakes extend beyond military concerns. Undersea cables carrying global internet traffic increasingly route through northern waters. These cables are vulnerable. Monitoring, protecting, or disrupting them is a growing part of modern strategy. Just Greenland's proximity to potential Arctic cable routes adds another dimension to its importance. Space also enters the equation. Satellites orbiting Earth pass over polar regions more frequently than equatorial ones. Ground stations in high latitudes are valuable for tracking, communication, and data relay. Greenland's location makes it ideal for such facilities, linking terrestrial geography with orbital infrastructure. As climate change accelerates, these strategic factors intensify. Longer ice-free seasons expand operational windows. Thawing permafrost complicates construction, but also exposes new land. Weather patterns shift, creating both hazards and opportunities. The Arctic is no longer static. It is dynamic. This dynamism creates urgency. Decisions that once could be deferred now feel pressing. Delays risk losing influence. New investments signal commitment. Presence becomes power. Yet for Greenlanders, this global chess match unfolds around their daily lives. Airspace monitored for missiles is the same airspace crossed by supply flights. Ports discussed in strategic briefings are the same docks where fishing boats unload their catch. Research stations built for climate monitoring also shape employment and education opportunities. This overlap is unavoidable. Greenland cannot isolate itself from global interest, nor can it fully control how that interest manifests. But it can influence terms. It can negotiate conditions. It can choose partners, at least for now. That agency is central to Greenland's modern identity. The world may see Greenland as a strategic asset. Greenlanders see it as a homeland, navigating unprecedented attention. The question then is not simply who controls Greenland. It is whether Greenland can control the terms of engagement in a rapidly changing Arctic. Because while the chessboard is global, the consequences are local. And as the world positions its pieces, Greenland stands at the center. Not as a pawn, but as a square. Everyone wants to occupy. Every great shift in global attention creates a moment of decision. For Greenland, that moment has arrived quietly, without ceremony, carried in on warming air and thinning ice. For generations, Greenland existed in a kind of strategic silence. The cold insulated it, distance protected it. The lack of infrastructure kept it beyond the reach of most ambitions. But now, the forces reshaping the world, climate change, technological dependence, and geopolitical competition have converged on a place that was never prepared to be at the center of them. The question Greenland faces is not whether it will change. It already has. The real question is how that change will be shaped, and by who. At the heart of this debate lies independence. Greenland is not a sovereign nation, but it possesses the legal right to become one. Its autonomy allows it to govern most domestic affairs, including natural resources, education, and social policy. What it does not control are defense, foreign relations, and currency. Those remain with Denmark. For many Greenlanders, independence is not a slogan. It is a long-term aspiration, rooted in dignity and self-determination. The idea is not to reject partnership, but to define it on equal terms. However, independence is not symbolic. It is economic. Denmark provides Greenland with a substantial annual block grant that supports public services, healthcare, and infrastructure. This funding accounts for a significant portion of Greenland's budget. Removing it without replacement would create immediate gaps in governance and social support. This is where resources enter the conversation again. Mining, oil, and gas are often presented as the pathway to financial self-sufficiency. On paper, the numbers appear convincing. Revenues from large-scale extraction could replace external funding and generate long-term growth. In practice, the timeline is uncertain. Major mining projects require years of exploration, regulatory approval, infrastructure development, and environmental assessment. Profits are not immediate. They are delayed, vulnerable to market fluctuations, and often dependent on foreign investment. Foreign investment, in turn, brings influence. This creates a dilemma. To become independent, Greenland may need to rely on external capital, but excessive reliance risks shifting dependence from one partner to another. Political autonomy without economic leverage can be fragile. There is also the environmental cost. Greenland's ecosystems are among the most sensitive on Earth. Damage spreads quickly and heals slowly. Fishing remains the backbone of the economy, accounting for the majority of exports. Contamination of marine environments would not just affect income, it would erode food security and cultural continuity. Tourism is often proposed as an alternative. Greenland's landscapes are spectacular. Ice fjords, glaciers, northern lights, and vast wilderness attract visitors seeking experiences found nowhere else. But tourism has limits. Infrastructure is minimal. Emergency response capacity is stretched. Mass tourism could overwhelm small communities, strain resources, and disrupt fragile environments. Growth must be measured, or it risks replicating the problems seen elsewhere. This brings Greenland to a crossroads familiar to many resource-rich regions. Economists refer to it as the resource curse, a phenomenon where countries rich in natural resources experience slower growth, weaker institutions, and greater inequality than those without them. The reasons are complex. Sudden wealth attracts corruption, distorts incentives, and concentrates power. History offers examples. Wealth does not guarantee stability. It often invites interference. And Greenland is aware of this risk. Public debate within the territory reflects a cautious pragmatism. Many Greenlanders support eventual independence, but not at any cost. Environmental protection, cultural preservation, and social cohesion consistently rank alongside economic ambition. This caution extends to foreign partnerships. Greenland has not rejected cooperation, it has rejected imbalance. Infrastructure projects are scrutinized. Mining proposals face intense public debate. Decisions are weighed not just for profit, but for legacy. Who benefits in 20 years? Who controls assets when priorities shift? Who bears the consequences if markets collapse? These are not abstract questions. They shape policy. Climate change complicates everything. As ice melts, new land emerges. Shipping seasons lengthen, access improves, but these same changes threaten traditional livelihoods. Sea ice used for hunting becomes unreliable. Weather patterns shift unpredictably. Knowledge passed down for generations must adapt quickly. For older Greenlanders, this transition feels like loss. For younger ones, it feels like uncertainty. Education plays a critical role here. Greenland faces demographic challenges, with many young people leaving to study or work abroad. Retaining talent requires opportunity, but opportunity must align with identity. A future built entirely around extraction risks alienating the very people meant to inherit it. At the international level, Greenland's decisions reverberate outward. Every agreement signals alignment. Every rejection sends a message. The balance between cooperation and autonomy becomes a form of diplomacy. Yes, some analysts suggest Greenland could pursue a hybrid model, remaining politically autonomous while leveraging strategic partnerships for defense, infrastructure, and development. Similar arrangements exist elsewhere, blending sovereignty with practical interdependence. Such models require careful negotiation and constant vigilance. The risk is not immediate takeover. It is gradual erosion of control through dependency. Greenland's strength lies in its awareness of this dynamic. It does not see itself as a prize to be claimed. It sees itself as a participant in shaping outcomes. This self-perception matters. It reframes Greenland from an object of competition into an actor navigating it. The future, however, will test this agency. As demand for critical minerals increases, pressure will intensify. As Arctic routes become more reliable, our strategic interest will grow. As climate impacts accelerate, global attention will sharpen. Greenland will be asked repeatedly to decide. Each decision will narrow or expand options. Each compromise will set precedent. Each success or failure will inform the next generation. The ice that once protected Greenland is retreating, but in its place emerges something else: choice. Choice about development pace. Choice about partnerships. Choice about identity in a warming world. Greenland's story is not one of inevitable exploitation or guaranteed prosperity. It is a story still being written, shaped by restraint as much as ambition. The world may fight over Greenland because of what lies beneath its ice and where it sits on the map. But Greenland's future will be decided by something far more powerful: the people who live there. And in a century defined by scarcity, climate pressure, and competition, that may be the most valuable resource of all. If you'd like to see more documentaries like this, you're welcome to subscribe.